Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome very much to our March Recreational Astronomy Night here at York University. My name is Tom Luton. I'm going to be your host this evening. First of all, can I get a quick show of hands? Anyone here new? Anyone here for the first time? Welcome. So this evening we've got several presentations. First off is Denis Grey with the Sky This Month, followed by Frank Dempsey with his current visual observing projects. We'll wrap things up with Jeff Booth and Tony Horvatin with the Aurora Borealis, a mesmerizing natural wonder. And then to final things off will be our President Scott Masterton with our announcements. Right, so Denis, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, everybody. Good to be back again. I haven't had a chance to do one of these in a while, so I'll be looking forward to seeing what we were able to figure out about the month. So we're looking at the month of March. As usual, we'll talk a little bit about the big picture. Some of the highlights are here. Not much to report this month on comets or asteroids. But note that it is Messier Marathon season. I know the center had been talking a little bit about running a Messier Marathon this year. I don't know if we got that scheduled. End of the month. It's coming end of the month. So that's something to keep in mind. And hopefully we'll have some questions and answers. So as I usually like to do, I like to sort of start off with what I call the big picture. And this is an all sky map that sort of shows you everything that's going on. And one of the big things that's been sort of highlighted in the news of late is planets on parade. So we have planets, all of the planets basically on one side of the sun relative to Earth. You can't see it here, but Saturn is kind of right about there, right about behind the sun. And then Venus and Mercury are in the evening sky. So I had a chance to see Venus on my way in here tonight, looking very good. And Mercury is heading for its greatest eastern elongation, best seeing of the year on March 18th. So keep your eye open for the two of them, and they will be passing quite close to one another as Venus is diving down all very quickly now as it's approaching us on the inside track of its orbit, and it's going to come between us and the sun later this month and then emerge into the morning sky by the time this month is over. Following on to that, we have Uranus and Jupiter, and then beautiful Mars is right up there, kind of in one of the prettier parts of the sky. So the winter hexagon is this sort of big asterism here. It's really obvious in the middle of winter, but as we were sort of heading out of winter now it's starting to be in the west, but you see it as a sort of the brightest star, Capella, Castor and Pollux, Procyon. You've got Sirius there, Rigel, and then, of course, Aldebaran. So those six stars together make this hexagonal shape, and it is kind of the big star pattern of the winter season. And then, but what's really kind of coming up to the fore now after, say, 9 or 10 o'clock at night is the spring constellations, particularly Leo with that backwards question mark, and the triangle rump on the lion there, and then Virgo, the Virgin, which is not a particularly bright or standoutish constellation, but has a lot of beautiful galaxies that you can find there. So galaxy season is upon us again, and we're getting into that season now because of where we are in the galaxy and where we are, where our night side of the Earth is facing. This is also something I like to show all the time is the yearly sun graph. So right now we're heading towards a discontinuity here where there will be an earth-shaking event this weekend. And that earth-shaking event is the advent of daylight savings time. So everything shifts an hour. Fortunately, most of us are in our beds, but when that shaking comes, you'll notice that there. But as you can see, we're heading into the season, and what you can't really see in this picture as well is how the time change at this time of year is actually very rapid. It's not your imagination. We're gaining about a minute of daylight on either side, both in the morning and the evening every day. right now as we get closer and closer to the equinox. At the moment of the equinox is the time when the rate of change is its highest. And then when we're in the solstice, either in the summer or the winter, that's when the rate of change is at its slowest. And the spring equinox is coming up this year on the 20th of March. So not the 21st, it's actually the 20th, 5:01 a.m. in the morning. So when you wake up on the 20th, it'll already be spring. And this was what I was referring to about galaxy season. So one of the things that makes galaxies easier to see and easier to find is when we're not trying to look through the Milky Way to look outside into intergalactic space. So during the spring, we're looking up north of the Milky Way. The Milky Way is kind of on the horizon, and straight above us, we're looking straight out into intergalactic space, which makes all of those galaxies that are there much easier to find. And at the same time, it means that there's less other goodies in the sky besides that, because all the bright stars, all the star clusters and so on tend to be in the Milky Way, band of the Milky Way. So that's why in the summer you see all those pretty star clusters, because then we're looking at the center of our galaxy and you're going to see a lot more stuff that way. But for now, it's time to focus on those galaxies. Looking west at sunset, we're starting to see some of our favorites from the fall starting to head down. So we have M31, M33 highlights in the fall. I always look forward to seeing them come back. They're starting to get into the muck now. Perseus also starting to get into the muck, although it's pretty close to circumpolar. And M45, the Pleiades and Taurus and everything, they're starting to get down there. But if you stay up all night, as some of us may during the Messier Marathon, and you get up in sunrise, you would see the beginnings of the summer constellations are starting to come there. And the big asterism I always look for is the summer triangle, which is made up of Vega, Deneb, and Altair. And so Deneb in Cygnus, Vega in Lyra, and Altair in Aquila. And those three stars often punch through even in downtown Toronto and make a really nice pattern. So that's what's there for you in the morning. And we'll be looking forward to seeing that as we get closer and closer to the summertime. Now, in the month of March, meteorologically, and I think Frank knows more about this than I do, but we're in a period where we're starting to move out of relatively stable midwinter weather. So as things get calm down, we often get some nice clear but extremely cold nights in January and February. Now things are starting to shift again as the daily insolation starts to pick up and the heat starts to pick up, and we're starting to see more unstable weather. So right now the cloud forecast kind of about 60 to 70% on average for this month. It's not as good as September when we have some of our best weather and our best weather prospects, but there are some good nights there. So the message is, as always, if it's clear, you should go out, because when will it be clear again? You never know. So let's look at this month sort of week by week here. So this week, starting tonight, we've got a few highlights. So the greatest elongation is when the planet Mercury is the furthest apparent distance from the sun. That's this weekend on the 8th. And the moon will be at its closest with Mars, 1.5 degrees away, which is really close. That's like a moon and a half's distance from Mars. So that's actually kind of a nice potential photographic, but certainly worth having a look for it, because it's going to be near Castor and Pollux in Gemini. So you have two bright stars, the planet Mars and the moon, all together on the 8th. And then on the 10th, Mars is going to reach a point in its orbit where it's actually, as seen from the solar system, it's at the most northern point in its orbit. One of the reasons why this particular Mars apparition has been really good is because it's been very high in the north. So as you're watching it go over, we're looking straight up, so we're able to see through the minimum amount of atmosphere. So Mars has looked better in telescopes than it would usually. So that particular milestone is happening on the 10th. And then on the 11th, we've got a double shadow transit on Jupiter. which is always nice. So there's a couple of those this month, so you might want to make a note of that as well. Jupiter is always worth checking. On the 12th, we have another close encounter with a bright star. That's Regulus. That's in the constellation of Leo, so the moon will get close to that. A total lunar eclipse, which we're going to talk about in a minute, on the 14th, which is looking forward. And then the zodiacal light season begins for the in the eastern or in the evening sky. So the zodiacal light, for those of you who haven't heard of it, is basically all of the dust that's left around in the solar system between the planets and asteroids. There's dust that's spat off by comets and little bits of asteroid bits and so forth. And that combined dust creates a little glow that you can see when the sun is hitting it and reflecting it right back at us. So it's kind of like it's at its best. It's always there, but it's at its best for 2 weeks in the spring and 2 weeks in the fall. And we're heading into that season. So in order to see it, you need a really dark sight, a nice clear horizon, and no or very little lunar interference. So that's towards the end of the month you will see it, but the season starts around the middle of March. So the lunar eclipse. How many people are planning to see the lunar eclipse this year? 1, 2, 3, 4. Come on. Everybody should be looking for the lunar eclipse. So this is actually one of those things where I was going, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. What a great public education opportunity. We're going to get out there. We're going to get telescopes. We're going to have everything there. What time is it happening? 2:58 a.m. Oh, well, maybe that's more of a do-it-yourself kind of event, perhaps. And that's what it looks like. But I've got a really good total eclipse. We've got a lot of really nice maximum phase. And the nice thing about the lunar eclipse is it's perfect for a winter's night because as you, if you've seen one before, they unfold in a very stately, majestic, and slow way. Unlike the frantic path of getting a solar eclipse done. You've only got 4 minutes. Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! This takes all that time, and you can go in, get hot chocolate, have a glass of wine, whatever you want, kind of thing. So, and also, as you can see here, the altitude is pretty reasonable. So it's not going to be, right down by the horizon. We're not worried about that. So it's going to be fairly high up. That's a blessing and a curse. So the blessing is it's easier to see and to find. The curse is if you want to take a picture, then you're just kind of taking a picture of the moon by itself. It's hard to get something interesting in your photograph in the foreground. So it's one of those things where it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Now, timeanddate.com has this awesome animation which they have for every eclipse. And this is what it's going to look at. So on the night, we have the eclipse begins with the penumbral phase, and the penumbral phase is hard to see. When it's near this point here, you can start to see there's a little bit of something going on this end of the moon, and you can see that the bite is going to come on the side that's opposite Mare Crisium. That's the way that these things usually go. So Oceanus Procellarum over here will get it first, but as it continues, the Earth's umbra, which is the actual core of our shadow, starts right around that time, and then you really notice it here. So this is when you actually see the moon starting to, I'll back it up a little bit more here. Come on. So at around here, you see this bite taken out of the moon, and it's pretty obvious. And then about halfway through, the Earth shine starts to punch through, and you start to see the moon going more and more red as it comes into the Earth's shadow. And eventually that little piece disappears, and then you have the entire moon in that red shadow. And as the moon passes through that shadow, where it's passing through sort of the northern point, so this edge will be darker than this edge, and then you'll see it kind of getting glowing again as it reaches that point, and then emerges into it, at which point in time you'll probably be already in bed. But nevertheless, if you are staying up for it, we can see the whole thing here from Toronto. So it's going to be quite the show, weather permitting, as usual. So this is a nice eclipse. Everything about it is great except for the time. Other than that, it's perfect. So can't have it all, unfortunately. Where is it going to be in terms of what else is behind it? So when you have totality for an eclipse, one of the things that happens is everything that's behind the moon, which is kind of washed out when it's full, will punch through and punch up. It'll become, because the moon is dimmed by like a factor of 20 or 50 or something like that. So all of the stars and everything behind it will emerge. Now, the part of the sky that the moon is actually in is actually kind of devoid of really interesting stuff. There are some galaxies, some SA galaxies and so forth around there. So a wide field shot might pull some of those in, but it's not ideal. I wouldn't call that a super duper opportunity. So I won't be too upset if I don't get something there. So after the eclipse, we get back to sort of business as usual. So the eclipse is happening at the point of full moon. And so now the moon is starting to wane. So we get another double shadow transit on the 20th or the 19th, spring equinox on the 20th. And the moon almost touches Sagittarius on the 22nd. And this is a bit of an interesting thing because the moon has, it follows the plane of the ecliptic, but it can go 5 degrees above the ecliptic and 5 degrees below the ecliptic, depending on where it is in its elliptical orbit and where we are in our elliptical orbit and everything else like that. But there's a theoretical southernmost point, which if you put everything together, the moon can get this far south at the absolute maximum, and it's actually going to hit that around March 22nd. So if you happen to be looking at the moon in the morning of March 22nd, you will see that it's almost touching the Sagittarius teapot, which is very, very close to the southern horizon for most of us here in Canada. So that's kind of a cool thing. And then on March 23rd, Venus is going to be going through what's called inferior conjunction, which means that it's directly between us and the sun. It's going to be, unlike what happened in 2004 and 2012, right? We won't have a transit of Venus because Venus is going to miss the sun. It's going to dive below it. But that means that it's going to be then emerge into the morning sun after that. And then the other thing that's kind of interesting that's happening on the 23rd is that we're actually going to pass through the ring plane of Saturn. So one of the things that I've been mentioning is double transit, shadow transits on Jupiter, which happen frequently because Jupiter's ring plane, or the plane of Jupiter's satellites, is the same as ours. Saturn, those beautiful rings that show on that funny angle, they only line up with us once every 13 years or so. Now, unfortunately, it's on the wrong side of the sun. But right now, and when Saturn emerges in this morning sky, in the April-May timeframe, you may be able to see Titan shadow transits on Saturn. So that's something for the next Sky This Month person to look at. I looked for good asteroid occultation opportunities, good comet opportunities, could not find any. The best available is a periodic comet, Schwarzmann Watchman. It's 11.6 magnitude right now. It's kind of hanging out near the Beehive and M67. So you may be able to find it. It's close to Leo, so it's kind of there. It looks like that fuzzy spot right about there. So it's faint but reliable, and its magnitude is fairly steady. Every other comet that's visible from Toronto right now is dimmer than that and tending to more dimness as the month goes on. So nothing much to share there. And we get to the final week of the month. The moon and Venus come into conjunctions. So for the second time this month, this time in the morning sky. So on the 27th, there will be this very, very thin moon. Venus will have pulled up from the sun. It'll be in the morning sky now, and the two of them will come together. And on the 29th, when we have new moon, there is a solar eclipse, partial, but it's only visible from the Atlantic provinces. It's literally the sun will not rise before the eclipse is over here. So there you go. And then one of my springtime faves is the moon will be close to the Pleiades in the evening sky on April 1st. A lovely photo opportunity every year. It pretty well has a conjunction or a pulse that's close to that every year. I had a look at transitfinder.com to see if we had any really cool opportunities where the ISS was going to pass in front of the moon or the sun, but not much going on there this year, but keep an eye on that site. And just in terms of the deep sky in March, we'll go through a list of opportunities or things. I think everyone knows that. The biggest opportunity is the Messier Marathon, which I think Tony and Chris are going to talk to later on in the meeting, but that's that special time of year when all of the Messier objects can theoretically be seen in one night's viewing. It's always a bit of a fun thing to see how close you can get to 110. And of course, the galaxies are up there. A lot of Messier objects and a lot of NGC objects, if you're pursuing your certificates, are only available this time of year. So now it's a good time to get out there and start to work on it. And just before I open the floor to questions, I just wanted to make a note that it's been 1 year since we lost our good friend Guy Nason. He was a fellow who got me into this astronomy biz and helped me get to know this Toronto Centre and was very welcoming when I first joined. So I'd just like to call him out again and say thanks a lot, Guy. I even had a successful occultation. I did not get nascent earlier this year, and I'll share some stories about that later on. So thank you very much. Any questions?
Yes, any questions from the audience?
Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you very much. Can we please see your slide of the galaxy? I just want to copy down.
Which way is which?
Yeah, which way? There
This
we go.
one,
Well,
the
right
viewing
there.
angles. Yes. Yeah, no worries. That's yeah. So just in terms of this, the winter Milky Way, this is where you'll see Orion and those big constellations in the winter Milky Way. In the summer, you would be seeing Scorpius, Sagittarius, and then in the spring, we see Leo, Virgo, those kinds of galaxies, and then in the fall, we see Andromeda and those other ones there. Yeah.
Okay, and I see we have questions online.
There's a question from Eric Briggs. He asks, will the new Blue Ghost spacecraft on the moon see the lunar eclipse?
It will see it will see a total solar eclipse of the Earth, I think, right? So, because it's going to be.
On the moon.
But did I answer that? Did I get that question right? Yeah. No, it should see a total Earth eclipse. Lucky robot.
There's another question, and Ralph Chu answered it, but I thought I would present it to you as well.
Sure.
Dennis mentioned the Messier Marathon. Believe he said at the end of this month. Is this something that members can get together to do? I am new to RASC.
Yes, absolutely. So it's being hosted at our club observatory, and all members are welcome. It's obviously one of those things where we need to confirm whether we're going to have reasonable weather prospects. But one of the great things about doing it up at the CAO is there's places to run in and get warm if it's cold. Messier marathons can happen from anywhere from like -10 to +10 degrees, depending on how lucky we get with the weather and if the weather is reasonable. And we do have road access to the observatory this time for the first time ever. So yeah, I think there's going to be announcements about that later in the meeting. And yeah, definitely. What's the dates, Tony? It's the last weekend in March. 29th. Yeah. Yep. So the March 29th. So make a note of that. And there'll be an announcement of a go, no go. It'll be a go, no go kind of announcement based on the weather prospects. And then yeah, bring your sleeping bag and some coffee bulbs, and away you go.
All right, and I believe that's out for questions. So thank you again, Dennis.
Okay, thank you.